Part of the maintain employee details is also the use of 10 additional user-defined fields. Again, with the other modules you'd be familiar with in Tencia, any user can define the prompts and database input masks for any 10 additional fields for each of those modules. That's been carried over into payroll, so you can add a number of different fields for an employee that might not be already catered for in the system. I've set up an additional banked hours entitlement. The other 4 standard that you're aware of in RSQL with the annual leave, long service, rostered days off and sick leave are converted across. But here it is, you can actually add any other entitlements you wish. Paid parental leave, as I mentioned earlier. So that's where the entitlement definition starts. Again though, for every employee type, you set up, I'll just go to the one for the live data, you can set up how that entitlement affects that the employee type. So with the different calculations for first year entitlement and so on. You've also got at this point the accruals account and what general ledger account that will post to if you wanted to integrate with general ledger. And again, for each payment type, we have an entitlements tab as well, and for each of those entitlements, what effect does that payment type have on that entitlement? So that's how you can configure the system. At a data generation point of view, if you actually have a look, I've processed the pay for payroll code 01, which is the first. We have an employee details inquiry. Now with the inquiry screen, with the inquiry screen, we've got a lot of information that you've seen previously with the balances, but there's also an entitlements tab, given that there can be an unlimited amount of entitlements set up. That's obviously in a grid, and the balances for the entitlements can be seen at this point. It's nothing we're unfamiliar with at this point, but you can see there's hyperlinks on these entitlements, so I'm able to click on the hyperlink, drill down into another inquiry, and I can see there that I have a PEBAL record which come across from the conversion, which is the balance of entitlements from RSQL data, and you can see my first processed pay has increased my entitlement by 1.6 hours and a value of 75. And as I mentioned before, what prints on the pay advice, you can see the accrued hours and accrued value is stored at each of these transactions levels, so it's at the time of processing. So if I processed another pay, those 2 values don't change. The screen looks slightly different. We've got an extra field in the header being the ETP flag. Setting this to a yes will actually trigger the prompt for a number of other fields to be entered for ETP payments. But if we return the variable pay for our first employee, you can see as I'm entering through, number of pays and hold periods are separated. And we've got our normal entry. If we have a look and I change, we've got our normal entry here. So if I change my number of hours for this employee to 50, so I work an extra 50 hours, an extra 5 hours, it changes the normal line. But what we've got with the line calculations is if a modification is made to this variable pay, as soon as I move off it, I get a prompt to say that values on the pay have been recalculated. Do you want to see the updated values, or would you like to move on to where you're going to anyway? I'll say OK, and you may have seen that those values changed after I selected OK. So again, I'll set it back and we can watch those values change back again. So as I save it, click OK, and the values change back to what they were. So full line calculations in the variable pay entry and standard pay entry screens. The other nicety about that is the fact that the payment methods for that pay are calculated out in the variable pay. So you saw in before in my standard pay for the balance of payment was going to go to the cash type. You can see at the variable pay level, the balance of payment there is $259. So it's calculated as well, and you can tell an employee before the pay run's processed exactly how much you're going to be paid in by each different method. When I enter in my time and a half payment type that I've set up for entering the start and finish time, and I finish at, say, 4 o'clock. So that's before. No break hours, which can come into calculations as well. And I click OK, and my 8-hour day is calculated in the actual entry program. Advantage of this, of course, is that these fields are available and stored on that transaction opens it up to third parties to integrate who actually want to import start and finish times rather than the hours. But yes, those start and finish times are recorded on this line. If I was to save it and go back, they would be there and retained. Process employee payroll, for those that have engaged with Tencia already, you're a bit familiar with the new process routine, and that's how process employee payroll is used inside of Tencia. The process editor is an advantage in this way because it allows you to tick on or off any employees from the process editor, or to tick on or off any payment type lines within the process pay. So I know a lot of people would use the print facility in process employee payroll, print out a report and then go and review what the pay was going to be processed as. This way, having it in the editor, you actually see it all on the screen in front of you, and just with a tick you can make the adjustments you need. In addition, if you need to make adjustments to values, there is a system parameter that allows you to edit the data while it's in the edit mode of the process. So if you process a pay, and you go through the process editor to see what the values are for that pay and aren't happy with them, then you can go to enter variable pays, and when you enter a variable pay for the employee you're not happy with, you can make your adjustment there and that value changes and it's ready there to be processed. Other enhancements, well, we talked about banked hours. I'll just show you quickly how this is set up because it is quite easy. You saw before that in payroll I set up an entitlement code. I think it's called bank, which means that the banked hours or the time in lieu is going to be stored in this entitlement. We've got to tell the system parameters that that's the entitlement type, so I can go to my payroll module parameters, and if we have a look, my banked hours entitlement code's banked. So what that means is that it will calculate that entitlement, but now I need to specify what payment types I want to trigger or go into that calculation. So in our payment type area, there are two fields. So I'll go to our normal time. There's two fields here, including banked, yes, minimum banked hours. This is the two fields we're concerned with in this area. So what I've set by saying that the normal time pay hours is included in banked is that I want that to accumulate into the hours. And I'll show you in a moment. I've got another payment type called banked, and this is including banked accumulate, and the minimum banked hours is 45. So what that means is for all those payment types that I've got that's set to yes, calculate and add up all the number of hours on those payment types. If it reaches above 45, then anything above 45 put in my entitlement, anything below 45 take off my entitlement. So for normal hours, normal hours is the only payment type in this example that I'm going to set to accumulate in the banked hours with a minimum of 45. So when I go to enter my variable pay, so I enter my variable pay. Now what we can see at the moment is I'm working 45 hours on this variable pay. Person's put in a big week, worked 5 hours over, and with the banked hours payment type is there, which can be added to the standard pay. So at the moment you can see the banked hours is calculated at 0, so I've got nothing to go to the entitlement. But as soon as I change my hours to be above the amount of hours being worked, change it to 50, when I save that variable pay, the 0 will change to a -5. So it brings the total number of hours on this pay back to 45. When I process that pay, again, there's one I did earlier. If I go to the employee inquiry, what you'll see is I've got a banked hours. I work 5 hours over, so that means I've got 5 hours in my banked hours that I can take in any one pay period. So if that's the case, and I've got 5 hours that I can take off in lieu, then that means for this pay, instead of working the 45 hours, I work 40 hours, which is 5 hours under the break-even point that we set up on the item. So when I add the bank payment type now, what you see is it's a positive for 5, and that takes it back to 45 as well. So if you work under or over, the value of pay hours is 45 in the banked hours, and that entitlement can keep a track of how many hours are in lieu.